Welcome to As the Key Turns. I'm David Lehman, and this is just a part of my story. This will be the last part about Bernard C. Welch. If you haven't watched the first two parts, I recommend that you do so now, or the following won't make a lot of sense to you. Last time, I was talking about the attempted escape of 6 prisoners over the fence of USP Marion on September the 7th, 1982. All the prisoners were captured and not one got over the fence. The investigation by the Bureau of Prisons, FBI, and a federal grand jury revealed the complexity of the plan Welch had devised and paid for. The investigation revealed that the guard force at USP Marion was unique to the BOP. Nobody worked around the prisoners alone. Each cell house had 3 guards assigned on days and evening watch. There were very little opportunity of having contact with a convict that was not witnessed by another employee. Many of the men, and they were all men in those days, had known each other since childhood. They lived in the same towns and their families socialized together. They were a tight group with an unspoken honor code that did not allow corruption. If, in the unlikely event, one of the men was guilty of corruption, he'd be hounded out of the service, and he, along with his entire family, would be shunned. It was a strong incentive to play it straight. USP Marion was known for having an elite group of individuals working there, as good or better than the old USP Alcatraz guards ever were. In the early days, some of the guards and supervisors had worked at Alcatraz. They passed on their experience to the newer employees. I personally had a supervisor that had worked at USP McNeil Island, a place that had convicts every bit as dangerous as the ones housed at Alcatraz. Now that the guards were cleared of any wrongdoing, the investigation concentrated on the outside assistants in the escape. The 2 men shooting at the guard towers were identified as Dale White, who was Galvin White's son, a convict who helped plan the escape with Welch. The other shooter was Star K. Thompson, prisoner number 01311-025, and he was released on the 7th of January 1988. Welch's co-planner was a fellow by the name of Garvin Dale White, prisoner number 04761-035, and he was released on 5/31/1996 after serving his federal time. White got the 2 shooters through his son and also arranged for a pilot, a guy by the name of Dennis Murray, prisoner number 82669-012, and he was released in November 23rd of 87. The pilot, Murray, flew the 2 shooters, that's White and Thompson, from California to the Marion Municipal Airport. Then, a sleepy Blackwater affair with little commercial traffic. Murray waited at the airport for a quick getaway by air with the shooters and the escaped prisoners. As I said in part 2, the escape did not go too well. The shooters hid in the woods and started shooting at the gun towers with the deer rifle. At the time, the towers did not have a bulletproof glass, a situation rectified after this incident. During a lull in the gunfire, the towers started shooting back, and the 2 shooters, not wishing to die, fled the scene. The prisoners were all caught on or near the fence. The convicts wisely stopped after the towers put some bullets in the ground at their feet. The investigators thought a local woman, Susan Swanson, was in on the plot. She had plenty of contact with Welch. She was interrogated but kept her mouth shut. She was dragged before the federal grand jury, but nothing useful was gotten from her after several attempts. She was never charged with any wrongdoing in the scheme. Soon after, she packed up and went back to Duluth, Minnesota with her daughter and cut ties to Welch. Welch was never charged with the escape. He may have financed the whole affair, but didn't take any part in the actual escape attempt. It might have seemed a bit redundant to charge him with a crime. I mean, after all, he was already serving over 100 years without the possibility of parole. He'd die in prison as it was, if he didn't escape, of course. He was also never tried for all the rapes or the thousands of burglaries that he committed for the same reasons. The investigators thought a local woman, Susan Swanson, was in on the plot. She had plenty of contact with Welch. She was interrogated, but kept her mouth shut. She was dragged before a federal grand jury, but nothing useful was gotten from her after several attempts. She was never charged with any wrongdoing in the scheme. Soon after, she packed up and returned to Duluth, Minnesota with her daughter and cut all ties with Welch. Welch was never charged with the escape. He may have financed the whole affair, but he didn't take part in the actual escape. It might have seemed a bit redundant to charge him with the crime anyway. I mean, he was already serving over 100 years without the possibility of parole, and he'd die in prison as it was if he didn't escape. He was also never tried for the rapes or the 1,000 burglaries for the same reason. By this time of his life, Welch left victims of varying degrees. Most were missing valuable property, some irreplaceable heirlooms. One doctor had his life taken in front of his horrified wife. Still others were brutally assaulted, beaten, and raped. After his arrest, the burglaries in Virginia noticeably dropped. He was a one-man crime wave. This should be the end of the story, but since this is about USP Marion convicts, you can be rest assured this is not the end. Welch should learn from the escapes he financed. It was his way of testing the security of Marion. He had learned that he would most likely be caught or killed attempting to get out, from the Alcatraz of the Midwest. Welch had previously been incarcerated at the federal lockup in Chicago. He had studied the layout and, most importantly, the windows in the high-rise prison. He and fellow convict at Marion, a guy by the name of Hugh Thomas Colomb, prisoner number 148, was released on March the 27th, 2015, hatched a plan with him. Welch and Colomb both claimed that there was a convict plot of a mass escape and assault on the warden, his staff, and the guards. The two claimed that there were guards in on the plot, and they wouldn't give any details that they knew if they were housed at Marion. Their allegations were so serious that it was decided to move them to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Chicago. There, the two were placed in protective custody unit for snitches. Most of the prisoners in the WITSEC unit were hardcore murderers and career criminals who turned on their gangs or others. Welch also thought that the guards at MCC Chicago were much lower quality and loyalty than the ones at Marion. He thought it might be possible to bribe or otherwise compromise those guards, or some of them anyway, and unfortunately he wasn't wrong. The convicts in the WITSEC unit would help for a price. One drug-dealing, multiple homicide convict was George Newby. He had a gun moll by the name of Diana Yaslava. In May of 1985, she smuggled in hacksaw blades in shoes she mailed to Newby. Larry Vaughn, a snitch on the Aryan Brotherhood, arranged a getaway driver and car. Yet another convict arranged to get Welch and Colomb on the phone with the conspirators on the outside. The WITSEC prisoners were able to talk to women at a dance studio in another building from their rooftop recreation area. Over time, the convicts talked several of the women into helping them. It took a lot of assistance and communication to coordinate the breakout. On May the 14th, 1985, there was a violent thunderstorm in Chicago. To tell the truth, I always wanted to say this. It was a dark and stormy night. The thunder was so loud, it shook the 275-foot tall building from time to time. And I guess we'll wait till the bus goes by. All the elements of the escape were in place. Most of the people think that the hard part is the actual escape. but the preparations are the hardest and most likely to get you caught. Most escapes are prevented in the planning, not the execution stage. Welch and Colomb entered cell 602 and put their plan into action. Colomb had previously sharpened the end of a barbell to make the pry bar out of it. Using a vacuum motor, smuggled masonry bits. The two drilled holes in the wall of the cell near the windows where the concrete was the most thin. Then the pry bar was rammed into the holes to widen the breach. The rebar was cut with the hacksaw blades. The two used leather gloves that they stole from the maintenance department, and they staggered the blows to the wall so it'd seem more like thunder and not hammering. It made a hell of a racket and some dust. The other convicts on the floor, they did their part too. Several staged a loud argument. The guard was tasked to another part of the prison and was absent from the unit. The prisoners interfered with his job and caused him as much distraction as possible without raising suspicions. Later, federal investigators would claim that some of the guards were given up to $25,000 in bribes to look the other way. Finally, the window was removed and the hole large enough to fit through. Half the sheets in the unit were tied together to make a rope, but it stretched so much that they didn't trust it. To fall from that height would be certain death on the concrete walk below. Instead, they used an extension cord from the floor buffer. It didn't reach all the way to the ground, but the two thought they would drop the last 10 or 15 feet. Rather than go one at a time, Welch went first, using the stolen gloves to slow his descent. Quickly, Colomb followed. As soon as Welch hit the ground, he rolled out of the way to avoid being crushed by Colomb. The drop was not as far as they thought, only about 8 feet, from where the wire stopped and the concrete started. Neither one of them was injured by the hard drop to the city concrete. A convict inside the cell pulled the sheets back and the extension cord and wound it all up, and he replaced it in the sink room. Meanwhile, the getaway driver had watched the two convicts slide down the wall and was moving as soon as the pair hit the ground. They ran to the car and were gone in seconds. The $1 million burglar and the homicidal maniac were loose once again in the world. It had cost Welch about $50,000 in payments to the Aryan Brotherhood. It cost 12 guards their jobs and 6 their freedom, plus the warden's career. The warden, the guy by the name of O.C. Jenkins, is quoted in the media as saying, quote, "Why didn't somebody tell me who those bastards were?" unquote. Welch started burglarizing homes just 30 miles from the prison in less than a week. He got some cash and 2 handguns from one of them, and he gave one to Colomb and kept one for himself. Colomb did what Colomb does best, an armed robbery of a grocery store in a place called Shorewood, Wisconsin. After the robbery, Welch thought the area was too hot for him. His next burglary, he stole a car and took off east. The U.S. Marshals placed them on their top 15 wanted list and offered a reward for Welch of $25,000 and Colomb for $10,000. The authorities thought the two were still traveling together. By mistake, they had a SWAT team break down the door of a house and cuff the whole family inside on the mistaken belief that Welch was holding them hostage. He hadn't even been there. Welch had rented a small apartment from a couple of senior citizens in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, Dick and Janet Pershing. The two old people were overjoyed to rent the place with 2 months' rent in advance plus 1 month's rent deposit. He handed over the $750 in cash, and they never even asked to see his ID. Welch told them some story about being an oil employee in Saudi Arabia on home leave for a year. Sounded cool, and they bought the lie. It was just the kind of place he needed to lay low. It was near Pittsburgh and the freeway, so he could ply his trade by night and live the life of a semi-retired man during the day. He quickly found a new girlfriend, Janet Ruse, to move in with him. It even had a parking lot in the back not visible from the street in the alley. Strangely enough, this great parking would be the undoing of Welch. In a small town, the cops don't have much to do. I know, I was a cop in a small town. They received a complaint about parking at 545 West Newton Street, Greensburg, Pennsylvania. They located the car and ascertained the owner. They ran the plates. They came back stolen. They checked the VIN on the car, and it was stolen from another place. The cops ran the plates of the other cars in the driveway and found one belonging to the Pershings. They knocked on the door at 1 a.m. and explained that they had a parking complaint and was trying to get a hold of the owner of the BMW. Mrs. Pershing told them it belonged to her tenant and pointed out the apartment door. The cops thanked her and left. 2 more officers arrived and they knocked on Welch's door. 20-something woman answered and they asked about the car. She told them it was her boyfriend and he was asleep in the bedroom. One of the officers took her outside and told her to be quiet. 2 other cops snuck down the hall, opened the bedroom door and pointed their flashlights and guns at Welch while he lay in the bed. There was a loaded, stolen 9mm pistol on the nightstand beside the bed. Welch never tried for it. He'd have been shot dead if he did. At the station, Welch told the cops he was an undercover United States Marshal. He stuck to his story. U.S. Marshals never heard of him, but the FBI had. He was printed, and the ID came back to Bernard Welch, escaped prisoner. He was taken back to USP Marion. Welch was kept in K Unit of Marion, where I met him. He was not liked by some and tolerated by others. He never had a chance to escape again, no matter what he said to anybody. There was no chance they were ever going to allow him to leave Marion again. Except that one time. He did leave Marion for good. He was sent to the federal prison medical facility in Springfield, where he died on the 21st of June, 1997. He finished his sentence on that day when his heart stopped beating. His partner, Cologne, was caught robbing a bank in October of '85. Now, if you like this video, don't be an ass. Hit the like button down there, will you? And I promise you, it won't kill you if you subscribe. And if you really like the video and you want to support me, by all means, go to patreon.com/asthekeyturns. And for as little as $1 every month, you can watch a video a week as opposed to 1 or 2 a month for free here on YouTube. And as always, thanks for watching.